Welcome to the Dave Shove Midstream Reading Series. My name is Richard Terrell. We want to thank Unity Unitarian, as always, for giving us this great space, and thank you for coming. We have books for sale. They took away our table over here, but we'll soldier on. So we have a table back here. After the reading, you can peruse books by tonight's readers, and I'm sure you will want to talk to them as well. We have a website. It's midstreamreadingseries.wordpress.com, where you can learn about future readings, and also there'll be a recording of this reading, video recording, up on the website in a few days, or when we get around to it, and Paul gets around to it. We also have a mailing list. Some of you, probably many of you, are already on it, but if you'd like to be added, we won't bug you. You just get 2 emails a month announcing the next month's offering. So I'll start this around. Where are we? And most importantly, the bathrooms, go out the door, take a right, take another right, and they're down that hallway. I'm going to read one poem to start off the evening, and I'm sure I read this last December, because I always host in December, and I probably read it the December before. It's a December poem. I can't read it any other time of year, so I like to work it in when I can. And it's based on that line in the Christmas carol, The Little Drummer Boy, that says, "The ox and lamb kept time." And as a musician, I always wondered, if the ox and lamb kept time, why did they need the little drummer boy? It was completely superfluous. So that's the premise of this poem. It's an animal lover poem. The ox and lamb kept time, little drummer boy. And so it came to pass in those days that the animals were musical. Their cloven hooves, caked hard in mud and waste, could thump a hollow sound at a steady pace on the barn floor, muted in straw. They never rushed, never dragged against the steady progress of their beat, which was music to the heavens. It was only human that the animals' minders and tenders, shepherds, stable boys, thought they themselves played the principal instruments, whether pipes in the field or the drum of a child in a song taken to be true. For the humans in those times, as now, saw themselves at the celestial center, a kingdom that rules the kingdom of beasts. Wise men with gifts, angels on harps and strings, may or may not have been present in the scene, depending on your level of belief. But the lambs and the oxen, they are unquestionable, beyond symbol, beyond faith. It was a barn. We know they were there, keeping time steady, inalterable, out of reach of human hands that shaped and misshaped the very planet to which all children are born, holy or not, on that night or any other. The carols are wrong. It is the flocks that kept watch by night, who, by instinct, maybe felt a pulse we cannot feel, and by their presence tell us we are not the masters. And next December, I'll read it again. Okay. Thank you again for coming. Our first reader is Catherine Ruck. She's the author of Buried Choirs from Tinderbox Editions and the chapbook Basil. She has poems published or forthcoming in Colorado Review, Pleiades, Hayden's Ferry Review, Harvard Review, Beloit Poetry Journal, Best of the Net, and other journals. She teaches at North Hennepin Community College. Catherine.
Thank you, Richard, for inviting me to read. I read back in the day. Everything before the pandemic feels like ancient history now, right? But back when it was above Blue Moon Coffee, and that I heard someone refer to the room as creepy earlier tonight, but I kind of like the character of that room. So yeah, it's nice to be here in memory of Dave Chauvin. So thank you, and thanks to the other readers as well. How I learned to speak. I was born in a sleigh drawn over ice by a fleet of black roosters. My mother did not make a sound. The roosters did not make a sound. The stars did not make a sound. The blades of the sleigh said, shh. So it's hard to figure out how to speak or what you want to say. And many of my poems are in conversation with people who I've never met, people who can't answer, who are no longer here. So I wrote this poem after reading a book by the poet Jack Gilbert. Early explorers sometimes carried watermelons instead of canteens. Ever cut open a watermelon and smell wind coming towards you across a lake, even though you're just standing alone in winter's kitchen? The happy heart is a problem, wrote Jack in a private letter to me on page 87 of a book I found in the library. There are jolts and miracles on every shelf, in every aisle of every orchard, under every sky, like the stars, which are much too beautiful to believe. They will hurt you almost as much as your life, the way you keep wanting to take all the wrong size things and make them fit this world. Dear Jack, have you ever hidden a melon under your shirt? Have you ever had faith in something that sounds hollow when ripe? So this next poem is a duplex, which is a form invented by the poet Jericho Brown, and he calls it a cross between a sonnet, a ghazal, and the blues. And so if you're interested, he published a whole bunch of them in his book called The Tradition. And he has some essays online. And the first line of my poem is from Emily Dickinson. Song of Songs. It might be lonelier without the loneliness. At least I say so when I'm feeling lonely. When I'm feeling lonely, what I say is the least wrong of all the wrongs I usually sing. I usually sing the wrong of wrongs. What's your good book? Is it broken? It's God to be a little broken. A milkweed pod cracked open like an eye. The milkweed cracks its clouded eye into empty cathedrals of wind. Into empty cathedrals of wind come seeds. Are they borne aloft on drifts of snow? Seeds adrift in snow. I see so, know. How lonely without this loneliness. So this next poem is written after a poem by Tomas Salomon, who is a Slovenian poet, and he wrote a poem called I Have a Horse, which I love. And so I imitated his poem, but since I don't have a horse, this is called I Have a Dog. I have a dog. My dog has 2 ears. I have a piano. On my piano, I play badly. I have a daughter. She likes me to sing her to sleep. I have 39 years. I am not more courageous than most. I have insurance. I have it because I have a husband with a real job. Aren't I lucky? I have luck. With luck, I will keep my husband. I have a body. With it, I do the most devastating things that I do. I have poetry. I fear poetry is only a hobby, but it keeps me from watching too much reality TV. I have Lauren from The Bachelor. When Lauren has too much tequila, she says exactly what she thinks. Lauren has some thoughts she should not have. She has a complicated history. For example, she was born in a country built on plunder and rape. I have a mother and father that love me. They love me even though they have divorced. I have rain. I like to watch it lick the bones of spring. I have an iPhone. In the evenings when I'm in bed, I read the news and close my eyes. Close your eyes. John of the Cross takes out his Sharpie and inks a pupil on your lid. Do you know an animal has just enough oil in her brain to tan her own hide? This process is called poetry. Count the flames hovering at the edge of the horizon. Are those planets? Are they skies? John of the Cross is touching your temples. Now he is draping about your shoulders a most magnificent coat. So this next poem is about how we build things like poems, but also how our bodies get built. And it's also a poem about how we build countries. Master plan. Write one good line, then write another good line to stack beneath it, is how my teacher told me it's best to build a poem. Well, fuck you. I don't care if you have cancer. That's the most ridiculous advice I've ever heard and even copied down in my journal. Like it could ever be so easy to come to terms with the end of a line. My son wanting to get back on the train to ride with all the other men he doesn't know are homeless and have nowhere else to be, while he scored a ticket to Underwater World at the Mall of America with his grandma. What I want to know is how do they make the glass so thick it can keep the sharks from pouring into Chipotle in the event of a catastrophic storm, which, if you think about it, isn't so unlikely in this district of cinder blocks on top of prairie on top of bones. Some history holds up a sturdy roof over your head, even though the foundation lies on stolen lands. Welcome to the roads with the soldiers on them. Welcome to the rain with its roads all running to the sea, to the cells in the bodies that are marching out of line, and to the bodies with the wind on them, the wind that choirs each church, the grasses knot and weave. It matters how things get built. It matters how things get built in this world. This next poem came out of trying to navigate the third grade math curriculum with my son during the pandemic and e-learning. And it mentions Euclid, who was a mathematician. I don't know if that's common knowledge. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I only know it from the third grade. So it's a poem about how you measure things, including men. Distance learning. Use your own body to measure end over end over end something in your living space. For example, how many hands can cross a kitchen table? 23 times my son's hand equals the empty table. This is submitted to the cloud, where his teacher may or may not be checking to see if he's there. We learn things that are equal to the same thing are equal to each other. So fog over the lake is equal to my 79-year-old father jogging in the cemetery every morning during the pandemic. Spring is equal to being born again in the poisoned air. Mama, my son rarely calls out for me like this anymore. The rain is equal to I can't count how many days spent looking out the window through blinds towards George Floyd Square. The laws of nature are but the mathematical thoughts of God, said Euclid. What is a law of nature? It doesn't add up, my son says, how you think it should turn out and how it does. How do I measure my son growing into what kind of a man? So this next poem is titled, Hope is a Thing with Feathers and Other Shitty Metaphors, which I just added that part on. So apologies to Emily Dickinson. I don't really have a good title for this one. So, my friend has a tumor. Cut it out, he said, after I sent him the second card, as if male was the cancer and it was all my fault. Everyone was sending him poems about birds. Once a man visited the Natural History Museum regularly over a 3-year period, posing as a wheelchair-bound invalid to smuggle out 10,000 rare eggs. Such desire for beauty is a sickness. Would I hollow out a secret compartment in my bed frame to hoard eggs stolen from the nest of a red-becked shrike? To hold one in my hands, all its gold-spackled fragility born of emptiness, is to know I'd do just about anything to conserve my beautiful counterfeit life. W.S. Merwin wrote a poem called In the Winter of My 38th Year, and I didn't write a poem in my 38th year, but I got one in my 42nd year. So this is called In the Spring of My 42nd Year. Oh, and I guess I wrote it after I discovered I had a heart arrhythmia. I don't know if you need to know that, but I just told you. So, in the spring of my 42nd year, I can't get my heart to stop juddering. The doctor said it's something about electricity, but not to worry. I'm worried. Would you worry? Don't be a buzzkill, says my friend who doesn't have a heart that sputters in storms, let alone when there's an eerie calm among the grass, which, if you think about it, is God on day 6, mounting a plan for tomorrow's beetles. You are impossible, is something else my friend says. When I text her about the mystery bundle of my heart, namely, the unnameable I know is not just another word for desire, though that too burns in the filaments of flowers, coiled in bare bulbs, plugged into wet dirt. They wake up the stars in their sockets, while I, incandescent, am as far from myself as ever. In the next manuscript that I'm writing, I have a lot of poems that talk about, that just have the word strange or strangest in them. And this next poem is called The Strangest Thing. It's another duplex. And I showed it to a friend and he said, you can't title a poem The Strangest Thing because it sounds too much like Stranger Things, the TV show. But I left it anyway, so. This is called The Strangest Thing. God separates my loneliness from the chaff and bids me eat the long grains, bids me like a long rain which brings grasses, but I am a stone among green gold fields. I'm alone among overgrown fields. God builds me a room to tend. I enter. May I be tender in rooms of myself built to be entered. My heart, for one, is one. My heart, for one, is one to be tenured. God damn the doors that stick to their jams. Unstick the doors, God, and let the winds and jamments winnow my hair. How some estrangements throw windows unto air. How God separates my loneliness from the chaff. And this last poem is another one after Thomas Solomon, and it's a question and answer poem. And so sometimes when I'm stuck and I can't figure out how to write anything, I like, reading Thomas Solomon, and I don't know. He has nice questions and answers, and even if you don't know what they mean, it's still comforting to try and talk with him. So, breaking ground. What are you wearing? My father's coat with the frayed sleeves. How do you feel about botany? Sure hasn't helped me grow tomatoes worthy of guests. So you don't like company. I'm always waiting for horses to come, carry me into the fields. Are you married? Yes. Why do you think so much in bed? Sometimes the sky sticks everywhere. What is the nature of understanding? Once I climbed over the fence to look for a red ball in my neighbor's yard. Did you find it? No. Is that the reason you're a poet? Possible. Are you your father's daughter? The lattice around a plant may be called a cage. Do you call it that? Poems are seeded with errors, which is why I think they are true. How is this going to end? The lattice around a plant may be called a ladder. Are you still waiting for horses to come? Look how the sunlight rides on their ears. Thank you.
That was Catherine Rauch. Patrick Cabello Hansel is the author of the poetry collections The Devouring Land and Quitting Time. And the forthcoming Breathing in Minneapolis, forthcoming February, is it now? Oh, you got it. Good.
Yesterday.
Oh, okay, not forthcoming. He has published poems and prose in over 85 journals, including Crannog, Illinois Review, the North Dakota Quarterly, Waterstone Review, and Lunch Ticket. Nominated 3 times for a Pushcart Prize, he has won awards from the Loft Literary Center and Minnesota State Arts Board. His novellas Searching and Returning were serialized in 33 issues of the Alley News. He is the editor of the Phoenix of Phillips, a literary journal by and for the most diverse community in Minneapolis. His website is artecabellohansel.com. Patrick Cabello Hansel.
Thanks, Richard. And Catherine, that was wonderful. I don't have many poems that I can make you laugh, but I love how your endings, too. So I'm going to read one poem from my first book, and I want to show you the cover. I always do this because the photograph is of 2 immigrants. My day job for 35 years was a inner city pastor, and 2 immigrants, one from a married couple from Chile and Brazil. And the photograph was taken by a young girl, she was probably about 11 or 12, who crossed the border. She's a dreamer when she was 8 months old. And just recently graduated from St. Hope, the first of her family to go to college. And so when you talk about immigrants, think about these people. So I'm gonna read a couple of kind of Christmas poems. The first one is actually 9 months before Christmas based on the Annunciation, and the title is The Egypt of Mary's Womb. And the title comes from a line in a poem by Robert Bly. Yeah. The Egypt of Mary's Womb. A small town, a back door, a young woman at her work, chopping, searing, holding. A flash, not so much of light, as the chorus of sight that light trails as it passes by. A strange word, an aspiration, a slight bow of the head, a warm wrapping of wings. There will be lions later. There will be swords. But tonight your flesh is reed and pitch, bitumen and straw, floating on the great river, eyes open, naming one by one all the stars of the vast quaking world. And then the other Christmas poem I'm going to read is the second collection of mine, Quitting Time, is an extended elegy to my father, who had a really good but challenging life. He spoke only German. He was born in 1912 in North Dakota, spoke only German when he went to kindergarten in 1917, and on the first day was told that the teacher would hit him if he spoke the enemy's language. His mother died when he was 12. He was homeless for a while during the Depression, served in the Army, was in the Aleutians actually when Pearl Harbor was bombed, which is closer to Japan than Hawaii is. And then served for 6 years, and then served in occupation in Germany, where his German language came in handy for his country. And he was always pretty sad around holidays, and I think probably from what he had gone through, but he did like Christmas, and this one is called At the Manger. Jesus was born dirt poor, you said, and then you hauled in the dirt. You built a Judean hillside from chicken wire and paper mache, painted the dark hills in red clay flats, poured in good black soil, and planted corn and grass seed to grow by the south window. We were allowed to put one straw in for each good deed done. We were allowed to wait. Your hands, calloused by work and war and wandering, knew how to build, knew how to dig the soul out of dirt and what to bury, how to curl around a cigarette, a rosary, the razor strop. Wounds are blessed by the snow, the wind calling the way away, the way home. Maybe you prayed in silence some Advent nights, sitting by the one blue light in Jesus' cave, wondering where your life had gone, what you still needed to be born. Maybe you wept. I don't know. I have inherited your eyes, your loneliness like a foreign tongue, your fear of dying. Each day we moved the Magi on their camels closer to the crib, under the good furniture, past the hot air register, chasing a star only they could see. And on our little living room hill, dirt begat the common miracle. Seeds die and bear fruit, and so do saviors. There is mystery to that. There is science, but finally there is no answer. There are songs, Father. There is always this dirt. My hands are like magi, returning by another route, empty, promising, still. And then the launch for this is actually going to be in February 1st, and I have some flyers there, but it's supposed to be out November 24th, and they said, don't plan anything, because sometimes the printing is late, and it came yesterday, it showed up yesterday. So it's called Breathing in Minneapolis. It really, most of it, not all of it, is based on 2020 to 2021. We lived just a couple blocks from Lake Street, and our church was 2 blocks from Lake Street in Phillips. And when the fires happened, we actually stayed in the church a couple of nights just to see if we could protect it. And so many of the buildings that were burned were owned by immigrants. So this is a poem after a poem by Jose Luis Peixoto. It's called Unforgiven, I Wake to a Burning City. Unforgiven, I wake to a burning city and walk tenderly on the limbs of ghosts. I reach Lake Street as she scrambles to pick up scraps of her nightdress, glass, aluminum door frames, old wood, the stares of shop owners who've lost everything. No one breathes in my city today, the air burnt empty by nights of tear gas, rubber bullets, and slogans, 150 buildings set afire. I pick up pieces of junk, first with my eyes, then my fingers, useless prayers that must be done. No bells ring because time has been abandoned, and the child who walks alone inside me does not know where to find peace, or if he should. There's 4 sections of the book. That's from the first section. It's called the Chastisement of Breath, and the second section is a foul wind. And so there's a lot of poems here about trying to be a pastor when you can't go see your people. And this is a poem about Mary, who died during COVID, and she was 89, almost 90 years old, and I couldn't see her in the last moments of her life, which is a time when most people want to have their pastor with them. So this is What If I Will Never See You Again. The last time I visited, I drew a cross on your forehead as you slept and said the words, the old, tender words. I had no oil and didn't think you'd like it if I used spit, like Jesus had on the man born blind. I licked my thumb as I left. I tasted what you were leaving. Now the care home and the hospital, the 2 barges of your body, are closed to all visitors. Your mind, your voice, no telephone, no sound. So I speak your name to the gray and cluttered sky. So I scatter prayers like outdated seeds. At Bible study, you would jump to the punchline of Paul or Moses long before we'd read most of the passage. Your eyes too dim to read, but your heavenly storeroom full of verses 100-fold, seed, stem, grain, flower, bread. I stare out the window. I keep watching the shadows. Will we ever meet? Will we ever meet again? That is heaven's part, our part to murmur your name upon name upon name, up unto heaven's ears, demanding an audience, invoking the sweet rain. I whisper across the divide. I reach out to you with arms too short. And obviously I stole something from W.B. Yeats, Easter 1916 there at the end. One of the things that I wrote a lot of nature poems in during COVID because they couldn't do anything else but walk around and just see, and I paid a lot of attention. In this poem, actually, Richard suggested the title. It's the same title as a poem by William Stafford called Traveling Through the Dark. Traveling through the dark. The doe leaps across the road. The fawn follows. I slow down. The two hover in the far ditch for that smallest moment, the one between decision made and action begun, the split second that decides who lives and who kills. The mother leaps back across the road to safety. The fawn and my front end coincide in space the way we could never do in spirit. All is silent on the night road to home. My headlights enlighten the corpse as if in anointing. A child king slain before his reign, a prophet no monument will note. Steam rises from the hood like incense. And this is actually another Christmas poem for a friend, a congregational member who, it's called He is Crossing on Christmas Eve. And he says he's not sure, because he's not sure exactly where he was, but he thinks he crossed the border exactly at midnight on Christmas Eve, the third time he tried to get here. He is crossing on Christmas Eve. He is crossing from there to here. No light, no angel choir, no stolid wise men bearing gifts. He is crossing in the solstice of forgetting. He is crossing underneath the carriage of an 18-wheeler hauling burnt corn. He is crossing the lips of those who curse, of those who make the cross night after night, of those who cross freely year after year. Of those who hunt, there are none lacking. Of those who buy, the world is without end. Of the little ones waiting at home, a star is not enough. He is crossing from alone to now, from restless sleep to the dawning sun, from humble inn to dreadful night. He is crossing alone and with eyes. He is crossing to take his place in the shadows. He is crossing as the clock strikes 12. He is crossing before the cock crows twice. And my daughter played soccer for years and years and years, and I really missed that time. We'd have the best conversations going to and from practice and games, and she played for the St. Paul Blackhawks. So this is a poem based on that. It's called The Midfielder Bows Down for Prayer. It has rained 3 days straight, and the Blackhawks are itching to get back on the pitch. There's only so much waiting that feet can stand. I dropped my daughter and the other two girls off at the edge of the away team's field and parked the car under an unknown tree. Heat has ramped up humidity, and steam rises off the grass like incense. As warm-ups conclude, N asks me where she can pray. It is that hour, and each bit of earth that is not mud is wet grass. I am not her coach nor her father, but she trusts me, perhaps because I drive her to each practice and match, my daughter and the others laughing with her in the back seat. I reply, wherever you can, I guess. And she removes her jacket, lays it on the ground, kneels on it, and bows towards the east. Her hijab touches the blades of grass that sparkle with the remnant of heaven. The ref's whistle blows as she rises. She smiles and nods to me, the little cousin of a bow, and takes the field with the other 10. Soon their feet will dig up pieces of earth like buried treasure. Soon the ball will fly. Soon I'll shout, pass the ball in, damn it, pass the ball. I think she was a frustrated striker playing midfield, so she tried to score from halfway across the field. I'm going to read one last poem. I wrote this several years ago, and I read it again 2 nights ago, and I thought, boy, this is still appropriate. So I love the sunsets in the winter. They just seem to go on for on and on and on, and they go all across the southern to the western sky. And so this was based on just sitting on our porch and watching that. It's called Listen. In the upper reaches of heaven, a deaf angel sings. Perfect pitch, precise enunciation. No need for piano or maestro, no backup, no stunned congregation. Her job is to sing the last bit of sunshine to sleep. After the afternoon has passed, the evening, the trinity of twilights, civil, nautical, astronomical. In the upper reaches of heaven, a deaf angel sings, minor key, a slow progression of notes and pauses from a being that has no need for breath. Her duty does not vary from night to night, but her repertoire stretches from the time before there was a time to the coming time when time will be no more. Silence is her favorite chord. As the thousands of myriads of colors flame out one by one, and Venus and Mars come out of hiding into the deepening blue, she sings, not hearing her own voice, nor the music of the spheres she was present for at their creation. If she could hear the cries of earth, children sold, lands pummeled into dust, peoples erased, perhaps she would sing the blues. But on this night, in the upper reaches of heaven, a deaf angel sings a lullaby, softly and tenderly, calls each restless flame to her breast, wraps her wings around their dying light, and coos them into sleep. Thank you.
That was Patrick Cabello Hansel. Leslie Adrian Miller's collections of poetry include Why, The Resurrection Trade, and Eat Quite Everything You See, all from Grey Wolf Press. And Yesterday had a man in it, Ungodliness, and Staying Up for Love from Carnegie Mellon University Press. Her poems have appeared in Poetry, Kenyon Review, the Antioch Review, and New England Review. Professor of English at the University of St. Thomas, she holds degrees in creative writing and literature from Stevens College, the University of Missouri, Iowa Writers Workshop, and the University of Houston. Leslie Adrian Miller.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you for those lovely poems. I'm gonna probably throw some strange stuff at you now. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
That's better. Yeah.
Better, okay. I'm gonna read some new stuff and maybe one old one. I'm gonna start with a poem called Derrida's Cat. I ran across a strange little essay by Derrida about his cat watching him naked. I thought, that is so like not the Derrida I know. So he gets a poem here. Derrida's Cat. 4 deer cross the white sedge like letters on an eye chart. I make them out partly with my eye and mostly with the mind's supply of possibilities. Like letters of the alphabet, they turn and curl and straighten up, but their signatures of movement are all absences of snow. There has to be a more sophisticated way to apprehend their meaning in a world full of screens. Like Derrida's cat, they've seen me naked through the glass and seen me seeing them naked too, but not awash in human shame, though shame is seldom on my mind when the gaze belongs to beings who, like me, move in constant vigilance as they cross the white page and enter the safe text of the wood. When I stand nude on the deck to wash, I'm not like Derrida, giving them a view of floppy cock. And deer are not domesticated cats, apt to sit, spread, and lick their nether parts as if the view is precious gift. I try to tell the optometrist who praises me for making out the smallest letters on the chart that I spend my days in endless lines of print, so often I don't have to see to read. That even in my dreams the letters march, familiar animals who turn and listen and poise to flee, because they know they're easy prey against the snow. All right, I'm going to read an old one now. Let me find it here. It's sort of based on a conversation I had with a lot of folks who were here once a long time ago about what, if anything, we would really be, we would find it necessary to kill for. Remember that conversation? And at the time, I did not have a child, but when I had a child, I began to understand. Lunch in the Tuileries. Kneeling in the dust with a good stick and the hard nose of a baguette purloined from our meal, he crushes the bread onto the wand and props it in a chair. When the fearless pigeons of Paris dive for his offering, he runs at them, arms open, teeth bared with a brutal glee even the waiters dodging rebuffed birds find cute. How is our laughter at this good? The shade is full of parked strollers, precious cargo of new flesh, fattening toward the same instinctual goal. What power there is, children claim like a sweet, a desire not grounded in need, but arriving nonetheless in their consciousness, an itch to rule even this makeshift roost. The birds don't learn, but the child does. And if we were to say such terror is terrible, to effect that measured parental voice that divvies up the world in rights and wrongs, while also imparting the sense that it's all completely provisional, this moment, unchecked, could rip a lifelong seam through the child's still soft neural tissue, a gulch of yesness that can't be filled except with more terror. Because there is a future in which he'll build a trap for something larger, fly at it with this same face on which glee's gone savage. All I know is, were you to appear in the garden at this moment as threat to that boy's body scooped from my own, I would wear such a face, and I'd be aiming to kill. He can take care of himself now. He's old enough, so. Yeah. I don't even know how to introduce this next one. It's called Meander Scar, which is something the map makers call the sculpting of Earth that happens when streams reroute themselves. This is sort of an ekphrastic reading of what they call a LIDAR map, or LIDAR map, which is points of light bounced off the ground. The maps are so gorgeous, I thought it needs a poem. So, Meander Scar. I should also say, I have a little cabin on a swamp up north, and it's on a meander scar, okay? So I have a lot of these. In LIDAR maps, they're lassos, not unlike the hoops of filigree adolescent girls etch around their secret names to catch their futures with this Casey or that Greg, to see which coupling has a ring. The ways of water have no corners, only curl and cutting swish. When you felt your hip against the planet's softer space, more years than you have left, these maps resemble all the ways you dodged the main channel, and all the ways you trickled back to the power of flow. Now the map is full of loopy script, ribbons, noodles, the lost art of girlish cursive, ringlets on the floor around the cut, the year-flowing locks dropped out of fashion. Don't tell me that asking the land to succumb to laceration is counterproductive. I know that refusal to move damages more than serpent pour, but I'm not done wishing that every woman's pain could leave the track, take her somewhere new and hushed, a low field perhaps, where she could seep and score a lasting likeness of her storied ribs. This one I may never publish because people may recognize themselves, but it's fun. It's called Carter's Booger. I always wanted to write a poem about a booger. Here you go. There was someone he despised, a woman, someone who would be given his desk in a future that did not concern him. So he pulled out a business card and planted one of his own giant boogers against his being asked to do things differently. Carter is long dead, and what I remember best from time with him were the long car rides to fat parties, during which he held forth on the philosophy of excrement, a byway of censorship, or spun uncouth metaphors around the most innocent of quips. Others will remember his love of shoes and booze, his good wives, his loyalty to men. He told me if I didn't come to his last wedding, I'd never work in academia again. But I was in the final throes of a PhD he didn't want me to have, and flying east for a drunken week would have been the end. Every time he called, though, I thought again about that fabled booger. Did she find it, the nemesis? Or was his story all a wish he didn't follow through? His face, like his ego, was massive. So too the nose and probable snot, which gets one wondering just how much of it ended up on desks, cars, on rows of chairs in waiting rooms, and how to measure that which lands moist and dries sharp. Gallons, ounces. Now that he's gone to an early grave by his own hand, more afraid of infirmity than death, it's easier to see how much the living body's generosities were, like his words, a script of small grudges that might one day lead to love. Okay, I'm going to read just a couple more. I write a lot about the beavers up near the cabin because they're so interesting to watch. So this is the beaver poem. It's called Big Stick. When the beavers crash the holiday picnic, hulking along the stand of pines to the west, the few of us who go in for closer looks want more. The toy terrier romps a circle around the beast, and the teens shriek and grab their phones. The owner of the land crosses his arms and grins, while a smaller man commands a big stick and moves in to taunt. I want to step closer too, see the snarl and tail. So I watch the man with the stick to see if the beaver will lunge or muddle off. The fur is sleek, still wet from the swamp, and blacker than you'd guess. The back humped so it lumbers like a small bear. But when the man prods too close, the beaver springs like a rabbit and slaps an oily paddle of tail hard enough to raise the dust. The teens squeal, and I purse my lips at the little man who taunts. But don't I also want and get the knowledge of what the beast will do up close? His hair is long and glossy, this man with the stick, and hanks of it swing around a delicate face. Somewhere up the hill, his children go in for seconds on the cakes, and a dozen larger men cradle beers around the fire pit. They've seen their share of beavers and don't care to leave their talk of amps and saws for this one. I shadow the man with the stick to the edge of wood, where two more beavers work to free branches of a poplar newly downed, the stump scraped to a raw and fragrant point. By the time the man smacks the brush to scare the others out, I've warmed to him, his curiosity at least, the boy of me casting about for my own big stick. All right, this one I'm still working on, and I changed it last night, and I'm changing it back right now. That's how it goes. My dad is 95, and he doesn't type texts. He uses the microphone. So the stuff that comes through is pretty strange and hilarious. So this is built from one of those strange texts, and I'll read you the original, and maybe you'll get what he really meant to say. My father breaks the rule. We urge him to go out and look at the moon after our call, that it's blue and full, having just cleared trees to the east. But his windows look only west, and he's not inclined to get dressed. I can't be seen in the hall in my pajamas, he says, as if it's someone else's rule he dares not break. But the rule is hers, we know perfectly well, our long-gone mothers, and one we've broken by design most of our lives. When I hang up, I trot across my sleepy street in my own pink nightie, boobs flopping, camera in hand. Countless handymen and neighbors have seen me in the yard with a hose or a shovel, bare ankles above which the gown flaps like Mercury's wings. So what, my violation says, more to her than anyone living. So it's no surprise when the text arrives. Just made a soiree down the hall. And we imagine him padding past each lady friend's door in his plaid shorties, the delicious naughtiness of arriving barely clad at the wall of glass, where the only constant of his 95 years shows up to the party, very bright and round, encountered no traffic, Papa. All right, one last piece here. Neighbors, I had a neighbor that I loved, we all loved, because she had the best gardens on the block. And she moved away a long time ago, and everyone who's lived there since then has ruined them. And she needed a poem. So it's called Annie's Plenty. We cannot stop mourning the Chinese peonies, their milk-white blossoms, fringed and doubled like a forest of moons in the twilight, or quit our disgust at the woman who had them scraped and buried for an expanse of new sod. Sod her jowly he-dog will splatter with pee and kill patch by patch because she's too busy smoking and poking her phone on the deck to walk him. Two ridiculous cannas stand in the former herb box like nutcracker soldiers. And everything else we loved sleeps in a tangle of broken root beneath the new mat of lawn. Sturdy sedum, two-story clematis, Dutch tulips, wild ginger, Siberian iris, and scarlet lilies. Even the long-limbed rhododendron got hacked and carried off. The honey crisp refused to flower, and the honeysuckle poured under the fence to escape. Angular and graceless as the dog, the mother of all this ruin, lounges in full view now that nothing remains to block our scrutiny of the green moat around her seat. We would have come for the peonies if we'd known, if any one of us had guessed Annie's blousy miracles were up for grabs. We'd have divided them among those who adored their final tender. She who walked the bouquets to our doors each spring, invited children to tweezer mealworms for the chickadees, stand on tiptoe and peer into their tiny nursery. The gift of her wet eyes above the blooms delivered for each of our griefs. Now the exterminator truck arrives at regular intervals and sprays down the whole lot. And the alley fills with busted plastic toys as the only child grows, his fleet of nannies ever changing. The men who once came often with their muscles and hopes, also scraped and buried too deep to try their soft tips against that earth again.
It was Leslie Adrian Miller. Before I introduced our last reader, this is a church, and I have a collection basket. Unity Unitarian provides us this space free of charge, but we like to make a goodwill offering towards their expenses and their mission. So if you're so inclined, here it is. Here's your chance. And after the reading, of course, you'll want to look at the books for sale and meet the readers, but also a number of us will be going to Sweeney's. Everyone is invited. If you get there before me, try to get a table in the quiet end. Sometimes they let us sit off to the left, so those of us who are lip readers can actually participate in the conversation over the noise. J.P. White has published essays, articles, fiction, reviews, interviews, and poetry in hundreds of places, including The Nation, The New Republic, The Gettysburg Review, Agni Review, Catamaran, APR, Salamander, North American Review, Prairie Schooner, Shenandoah, the Georgia Review, Southern Review, the Massachusetts Review, Waterstone.
Oh, stop.
Okay. I'm just reading what it says.
Shorten it.
Okay. All right. J.P. White is the author of 6 books of poems and a novel, Every Boat Turns South. His 6th book, A Tree Becomes a Room, was the recent winner of the White Pine Poetry Prize, selected by Danusia Lamaris, and has just been published by White Pine Press. The Last Tale of Nora Bow, of course, a novel, is forthcoming in 2024 from Regal House Publishing. White is the editor-at-large for Plant Human Quarterly, a website, jpwhitebooks.com. J.P. White.
The illuminary, John Espaggi, is here. I'm so pleased. And many others here. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming. So, here we are. So many wonderful poets have been in the Twin Cities, sung and unsung, not the least of which was Richard Sully. So here is a poem for Richard. After the tumor had been cut from his throat and the radiation had started to cheat his swallow, he told me how in the long middle of a winter night in Ward C, he got up craving a smoke, even though he no longer smoked. And he walked down a hall with his IV pole to a fire escape so he could stand outside and pretend he had gone there to draw on a cigarette. And once there, it started to snow. And at first he didn't see the other man who had come there for the same reason with his IV pole. But then, through the expanding steam of breath, it became clear my friend was not alone. He was not startled, but instead started talking with the other would-be smoker, as if this sudden gathering was a normal outing for both of them. The other man said he was dying of lung cancer, and my friend said he had had his last rites read 3 times, and maybe he was already dead. But the fact had not yet sunk in. The 2 men stood on a fire escape in St. Paul, Minnesota, and shared something in that unlit place. And I picture them now, wondering if they met again after they were gone. For by the end of their winter talk during a snowfall, they swore they would talk soon and often. The sound of one Russian name in my ear. This is from my daughter who's in the audience. It's in 3 parts. 1. When I told our host Luba I had pus and blood draining from my ear, and I couldn't board a plane in such a condition and return to Minneapolis with our daughter. All that way, how many time zones? Holding my head in a handkerchief, she said, "In Russia, we don't go to doctor even if we are dying. You are pathetic." You would have been hard-pressed to find anyone who knew less about an infant. Nothing about feeding and changing, nothing about how to soothe her. Though I had no skill, I wanted to be able to hear her, so I told Luba I was pathetic. And I needed her help to find a doctor. She shook her head and we went off in a cab, and I found a doctor from the West who claimed to have escaped from America after a malpractice suit blew up. To get there, he flew his own plane under radar and landed outside Moscow, then stole a bicycle. He loved the raw wild of the place, loved how all you had to do was keep the mafia happy. I'm not sure he ever looked at my ear. 2. The madcab ride all turned out according to humble plan. I got drugs that day. Luba and I shook hands. My then wife and I adopted a daughter from an orphanage in Nizhny Novgorod. And we got on a plane. 3. She almost never calls me now, but she does text often. My ear has never been the same. It can't be fixed. Vera means faith in Russian, truth in Latin. Vera, one of the 3 martyred saints whose portrait is found on keychains, on books, above light switches, in churches and cemeteries, everywhere in Russia. This girl, this name abiding. Vera means I can drive all over Russia with a Russian woman who thinks I am pathetic. Vera means I can still hear a daughter crying in a train station where dirt-covered mushrooms and tiny red apples are spread out on a tunnel sidewalk. Vera, the story of all my listening, long ago and now. Most days I will say her name to myself just to hear the sound of it. 4 silver cranes. Not everything was better in the past. Not the trudgeon, the knife, the rope. Not the seas torched with oil and blood. Not the ones who dealt in slaves, broke treaties, and laughed at the ones down on their knees. That list is long enough, so we can stop now and remember instead the trout streams snaking between Wyoming and Montana, the blues bars in Cleveland with gin and eggs served after the last set, summer nights in Sonoma tasting the ocean mist free of smoke, the fat jade crickets singing after midnight without knowledge they will be devoured at dawn by the meadowlarks once so thick you could stroke their feathers. I would like to go back to the tortoiseshell butterfly meadow of an earlier year. And I would like to stay here inside this ruin where we lay down on the earth, thanking her for making room for us, who met late in years. And now here we are looking up at 4 silver cranes on a figure 8. They're set and glide a gateway into the upper room of this once only. So this book moves around a fair amount. So we're going to go to France here. The fig tree in Luperon. Out for one of my walks before the heat returned, I remember meeting this fig tree. What I can't remember now is whether this meeting occurred before or after I found Camus' grave. That small, simple stone affair overgrown with grass. I do recall standing outside the pink door of the silkworm loft where he lived and smiling at how he could almost reach across his street and touch a church. What else? My brother sent out his nightly notes from Chemo Brain, and I walked with such guilt even though he begged me to go to fucking France. And my marriage? I couldn't find its fig tree, its pink door, its church, only its stone gate shadowed by tall grass. I know I was crying in the fire of August and looking for a fig tree the gravekeeper told me was so abundant it could chutney an army. And I did find it beyond the cemetery, this lone tree with limbs spreading low and wide, dressed in the ruin of summer, the ground of its standing littered with rotting husks. I pulled apart the branches, ducked inside a sticky cavity, and picked a purple fig. Not one wrapped in ham, chèvre, and dipped in honey. Not one sautéed in butter and spread on bruschetta and dribbled with balsamic, sold on the corner where the Algerian lived. But a naked one, with its head in the sun and its feet in water. And I held the flesh of its long, unstoppable life in my mouth and rolled its crunchy seeds on my tongue. In the beginning was the Word, the moist, luscious, solitary Word, and the Word was fig. We'll go to Hawaii with the whales here. Something magnificent. After picking up milk and eggs, then walking through a parking lot, we can forget that something magnificent and invisible is always with us. The way the unseen mother humpback is always somewhere beneath a swell, teaching her calf how to hold its air longer with each dive. For the last month of her life, I slept in the room next to hers. But on the last night, I slept on the floor beside her bed, listened to her foamed mucus expulsions. This was the first and only time I stayed alone with my mother. I was afraid of her rasp and drag, how everything strangled in her was also in me. Difficulty, death, everything. I lay there remembering how nothing is what it seems. Her small last room was really an ocean. Every time I put my head under water, I heard those giants and their young. So aging, that's a kind of a curious thing. We just can't sort of quite believe that we're the age we are, and then we have to sort of say, well, geez, what am I going to do now? In praise of failure in my 7th decade. Today I went looking for a word, but it did not come looking for me. So we remained lost to one another. I've not given up on what it might offer. The same way I won't give up on a tattoo repeating its message from beneath a sleeve that balloons next to me at the cafe. Look, I've lived long enough to know when you seek something out, mostly you only find the restless ghost of it and not the thing it once was. But someone has to keep failing to catch it with a pen and sword, failing to hear the meadow and sky of its earlier travels, failing the splendor, the ragged scar. Someone has to hold the loose page and wait out the night and the next day, hoping this one word will open the door and step through. Just read a couple of others. You there in bed still sleeping. Any minute now, I'm going to fall more and more in love with every nail in the board. The stink bug on the ceiling, the mouse in the ceiling joist, the linden that died over winter. Any minute now, the spring that will never arrive will be my friend, and I will welcome the angel of the flaming sword who keeps me from returning home. Any minute now, I will stop writing letters to the governor and telling him where he has failed to meet his obligations. And I will gladly sit under the rainfly of everything I don't understand. Any minute now, I assure you, everything in my world and yours will be regarded as sacrament. The locked door, the open window, you there in bed, still sleeping. So, I think one thing what's the best thing that's happened to me about writing is developing a daily practice. And I didn't used to have this, but maybe 20 years ago, Jim Moore said to me, he said, well, why don't you just write shit every day and just, get up as early as you can and just start writing, and something will emerge out of that. Well, that'll be good. And so I write something every morning from about 5 to 7:30, And then I often send it to Jim, and he sends something back. He says, well, try again, or it's pretty good. You can do better. It's not as good as your best. So at any rate, this is partly about that. It's called About That Love Letter to the Earth. Every morning I rise in the dark to write another love letter. I write of the sprawling Russian sage at the end of my driveway, how the bumblebees stay with it until the pollen blows out in September. I write about sailboats that never leave their moorings, about brother-sister dogs from the pound, about kites, stone-arch bridges, plumeria, fat, uneaten eggplant, the goldfinch I once met looking for an island, and Amy who wanders our road looking for her room at the Starfish Apartments. I tell myself from the edge of my chair, the future of the human race is not set in the stone of our nasty and brutish ways. No matter the million dead ends we have laid down, no matter the fires and the fools who would take all the wreckage for themselves, I tell myself the universe is still looking out for this blue thread woven into a vast tunnel of stars. I know it seems silly to be writing such a letter in the dark, a letter few people will ever read, but it's all I know to do. Tell the earth as long as I am able. I will keep coming back to my chair in the dark, to hunt, to wrestle, to pray, to open my eyes after sleep and have a look around. Thank you so much for welcoming us all. What now, Richard?
We'll go to the bar.
Any questions for any of the poets, the wonderful poets that read? No?
I think it's conclusive.
Okay. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. That's J.P. White.
Yeah.
And yes, and it was an amazing evening.
Yeah.
And this will send me into and through the holidays. Thanks for coming, and let's have a round of applause for all of tonight's readers. Catherine Wright, Patrick Cabello Hansel, Leslie Adrian Miller, and J.P. White. Wonderful. Thank you. Next month, January. There's full thinking.
All in favor?
January 11th, Mark Walker will welcome Deborah Keenan, Elizabeth Weir, Matt Mauk, and Bill Reichert. So I hope to see you then. And Sweeney's just down the block. Join us if you can. Books for sale. Thank you for coming.